What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the final game week before the World Cup break. It is, of course, Game Week 16. I'm going to go through some of the important press conference updates about Haaland, Wilson and Mitrovic, take a look at my team, and then we'll go through some of your questions as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and let's jump into it. So it seems like every single final thoughts video I do at the moment starts with us talking about Erling Haaland because we're just not quite sure whether he's going to start or not. And Pep Guardiola has pretty much said the same thing that he has over the last couple of weeks. So I've taken these tweets from Fantasy Football Scout. Make sure to check them out if you're not already. So this is what Pep said about Haaland possibly starting this weekend. We'll see. We'll see. We have training this afternoon. We'll see. So every week he says that, right? He doesn't know at that point. They've got training, then they'll decide. Then it goes on to say the City boss added that the forward was a little bit better, right? And what was he last week? A bit better. What was he the week before? A bit better. And in both of those weeks, one, he wasn't in the squad, and then for the next one, he was on the bench. Now, the fact that he played some minutes against Fulham, it was about 30 minutes, I think, is obviously a good thing, but he was in the Carabao Cup squad and didn't come on at all. Now, some people will say, well, he was always going to be rested fully in that game anyway. That's a good thing. But personally, I would have liked to have seen him come on again, especially when they were winning, because that kind of shows that Pep is okay to give him some minutes when the game's already won, just to kind of build up that rhythm that kind of Pep Guardiola talks about quite a lot. So I got to be honest, this does worry me a little bit. I think in terms of what to do with him, you could sell him for Harry Kane if you had no other transfers to worry about. It's something I'll consider, but ultimately I don't think I want to lose the team value. He did go up in price again this week. So if you're someone like me that bought him at 11.5 million, he's now 12.2. So if I sell him, I have 11.8 million to spend. And if I want him back, which I definitely will after the World Cup if he's fit, because not only is he just ridiculous in terms of the amount of points he gets, and obviously Man City will continue to score loads of goals, he's going to have the whole month off. He's not going to the World Cup. So it would cost me 0.4 million to buy him back, and I'm just not sure I want to do that. Like, had we known he wasn't going to start in Game Week 15 either, and then there was a chance he wasn't going to start in Game Week 16, I possibly would have sold him in Game Week 14, but I haven't done that, so I've got to make the decision based on this week, and I just probably won't sell him. I'll probably just hold that value. If you got on Haaland a little bit later, and it's only 0.1 or 0.2 million that you're going to lose, that might be a good reason to sell him. We know that he can come off the bench and get points, but I think it will depend on how the game is going. And look, this is nothing that Pep has said, no reports on it or anything like that, but I do wonder if the plan was just to either not play him against Fulham or play him for a little bit less time, but because of the way the game was going, they had to put him on for half an hour. So if they are like 2 or 3 goals up against Brentford with like 20, 30 minutes to go and he starts on the bench, are they definitely going to bring him on for that? I don't think that is guaranteed. So it's a little bit of a tricky one. The fact that he played some part of the game last week means there's an even better chance he starts this week, but we don't know that for sure. So in terms of selling him, you could look at that. Depends on your team value. If you're not going to sell him, it then comes down to whether you bench him or play him. I will probably play him no matter what, but I probably won't captain him unless we get team news. I'll probably just put it on Salah instead. I know some people will be thinking you're always looking for an excuse to do that, but last week when Haaland didn't play, I put it on Alvarez because obviously Salah had Spurs away and I wasn't expecting him to necessarily get 2 goals. But this week he's got Southampton at home. A lot of you will own Kane against Leeds at home. A lot of you will own De Bruyne against Brentford at home. All 3 of those players, Salah, Kane and De Bruyne, are definite captain options if you think there's a chance that Haaland could be benched. Obviously, you could just captain him and hope he either plays from the start or completely misses out, but that seems unlikely. He's been on the bench for the last 2 games, so I think it's either a start or a bench, and if he gets benched, there's a cameo chance. And I know a lot of people think, well, off the bench he could get anything, like he did last week, almost got 2 goals, so that's fair enough. But what if he only comes on with 10 minutes to go, or 15 minutes, or something like that? I feel like if you think he's going to be benched, or you know he's going to be benched, you've got to put it on a different premium instead. That's just my opinion. Let me know below if you think different. Before we get into the next part of the video, I wanted to talk about today's sponsor, SoRare, which is a sports platform that allows you to collect digital cards you can then use in fantasy football tournaments. And if you do love fantasy football, which I hope you do because you're watching this video, you're going to want to check out the Global Cup, which they've just launched, completely free to play, that is going to run alongside the biggest tournament in world football, right? And some of the prizes you can see on screen right now. So you got meet and play football with Zinedine Zidane, VIP tickets, signed jerseys, and and a whole lot more. So given it's completely free to play, there's no reason not to check it out. I'm going to show you my team in just a second, but if you want to sign up, click that link in the description below. Picking your squad couldn't be easy. You get 100 gems to spend. Each player is worth a different amount, and you just have to pick 2 players from each position. So for forwards, I've gone for Lukaku, who's always very reliable in fantasy football tournaments, and Valencia as well. With midfield, I've gone for Havertz, who should play up front for Germany, and even Perisic, who's very attacking as well. With defenders, I've gone for Tagliafico, and I've also got Joachim Mæhle. Anyone that played Euro 2020 will know how good he was from a fantasy perspective as well. And with goalkeepers, I couldn't go without any England players, so I picked Jordan Pickford and Manuel Neuer. Easy as that. So once you've picked your squad, you only actually need 5 players for each round to play. So 1 from each position plus an extra player as well. So I'm going to go for Manuel Neuer in goal. I'm going to go for Joachim Mæhle in defence, Kai Havertz for midfield, and then Lukaku up front. And for my extra player, I always prefer going for an attacker over a defender. So I'm going to choose Perisic. And the last thing to do is choose a captain for the first round. And I'm going to go for Kai Havertz. And that is it. That is my squad set up. Easy as that. Completely free to play. Click that link in the description below. And all you've got to do after that is join the Let's Talk FPL Mini League. The top 3 people in that league will win official signed jerseys. It's completely free to play. It's going to take you 2 seconds to set up a squad. You've only got to pick 8 players. Click that link in the description below to get signed up. Use the league code to join my league. Not only can you see if you can beat me, but you also might win a prize as well. There's no reason not to. I'd say if you bought Callum Wilson last week, you're probably quite frustrated. Coming off for a 1-pointer against Southampton, and now he's a doubt for Chelsea at home in game week 16. So this is what the tweet says. Callum Wilson has trained away from the group this week due to illness and remains a doubt for the game against Chelsea. I think I saw another tweet, I can't find it now, where Howe said he has trained pretty well, but obviously they've got to make a call on him. So he's not 100% out, but he is a doubt. So it's a little bit frustrating if you're an owner. I think if you've got no other issues to deal with, I would probably sell him. If I've got the money to upgrade, I would go to Jesus or Nunez or someone like that. If you need someone at his price or below, you could take a punt on someone like Martial. You could go for Skamaka, maybe Solanke. You can't go for Mitrovic, as you'll find out in a second. He is out for game week 16. So they are some of the options you could go for. If it involves a hit, I really think it depends who you're bringing in. If you can upgrade him through a hit for like someone like Nunez, or you're really confident that Martial can get something, it might be worth it. But in that situation for a hit, I would be tempted just to hold on to him, hope that he plays, and if he doesn't, the person that's first on your bench, maybe Andreas Pereira, can come on instead. Part of me is wondering, right, I don't want to question footballers' professionalism, because in terms of dedication and stuff like that, they're much more dedicated and professional than probably someone like me, right? I get that fully, but they're also human, and Callum Wilson has been called up to the England squad. He's the only other number 9 apart from Harry Kane. I know in the back of Southgate's mind, Rashford is probably in that squad, partly because he can play on the left, but also because he can play central. But if Kane was to get injured, I'm pretty sure if he was fit, Callum Wilson would be straight into that team. So he's got to be thinking about that a little bit. Is this illness just going to be slightly worse than normal for Chelsea at home, just so he doesn't risk anything to be in that England squad, to kind of miss out from that England squad? He might not get another chance, right? You just don't know. He is someone that can be injury prone at times. And to be fair, when I watched the Man United versus Aston Villa game yesterday, none of those players that are going to the World Cup, like Fernandes and Eriksen and players like that, none of them looked like they were worried about being fit. They were playing just like they always would. So Callum Wilson, I'm sure, is exactly the same. But again, footballers are humans like the rest of us. And if there's, you know, if there's like any doubt in his mind about risking it this weekend, who knows? Will that just keep him out? I don't know. That's just some speculation on my part. But I don't think that really matters in terms of what you do with him. I think if you've got a spare transfer, you probably just get rid of him. I don't think Chelsea at home is that great of a fixture either. Like, I think when you buy a player, like if you're someone that got Callum Wilson in like 2 or 3 game weeks ago, he had a run of fixtures that was pretty good and you didn't mind Chelsea at home. But he's not someone, if he was fully fit, that I'd be looking to bring in this week necessarily. I think Newcastle can get something from that game, maybe even win it. And of course, to do that, they've got to score goals. And if Wilson plays, he could be involved. But I don't see Chelsea conceding a huge amount, maybe 1 or 2. So it's not even like it's that necessarily big of a risk to get rid of him, especially when he's a doubt. So if you've got the free transfers, I'd probably be looking to take him out. So Mitrovic is out for game week 16. Originally, when Marco Silva was asked about team news and injuries and stuff like that, he just said it's not much different to the last game. And to be fair, Mitrovic did miss out in that game. There was reports going around that he might just be out for game week 16. But then there was an update from Fantasy Football Scout that said in the latter part of his press conference, Marco Silva ruled Mitrovic out. I did find it a bit surprising there was no follow-up originally about Mitrovic because he's so important to Fulham. But there you go. He is out. So again, if you've got spare transfers, you could just get rid of him. I think because we're in game week 16 and we've got unlimited free transfers next week, you can just use someone off your bench and bench Mitrovic if there's another move that you want to make. So if you take my team, for example, and don't get me wrong, I've not got Mitrovic. You're going to have to pretend a little bit here. But if I had Mitrovic here instead of Alvarez, okay, I've not really got anything else to do with my team, so I could use a transfer. But it wouldn't be the end of the world to just bench him for kind of Andreas if I wanted to, or maybe even bench Andreas and Mitrovic for Webster. So if you've got a good bench, you don't have to get rid of him, especially if you've got other stuff to deal with, right? So if you've only got like $1-ish million to upgrade one of your forwards and you've got Wilson and Mitrovic and a good bench, you might bench Mitrovic, sell Wilson to Nunez and just play one of your bench players instead. So there's lots of different ways you can do it. If you've only got the money that Mitrovic costs, around 6.7, 6.8 million, there are kind of, I would say, a lack of forwards around that price. So Solanke, I think he's not a bad option against Everton at home, pretty much guaranteed to play for good minutes on penalties. I don't really rate the Everton defence that highly. With Aston Villa, I think it's Brighton away. I just don't think I would go there right now. I don't think Watkins is the worst option this week, but I think I would have Solanke over Watkins if I'm honest. Moving down the list, like Mbomo's got Man City, Awani, I think Nottingham Forest have got Palace at home, but you can't guarantee their minutes, which is a little bit of a worry. And there's just not a huge amount of other players. Like Antonio's a little bit more expensive. Leicester at home. I'm going to assume that Scamacca starts that game, so at 6.7 you could go for him. If Haaland is not starting tomorrow and you get that team news and you're willing to risk, the servers going down, then Alvarez could still be a good option for those of you that don't already own him. And the other player which a lot of people are looking at is Martial, who's also 6.7. Now, he played about 60 minutes against Aston Villa, so hopefully he'll be fine by Sunday, but he's just so injury prone. Like, if we got to Sunday and then the reports started coming out to say that Martial picked up a small knock, you couldn't be surprised whatsoever. For what it's worth, I think Man United are a better team with Martial in it. I think Fulham are a team that do concede chances. They will cause Man United problems for sure. But I think Man United will also cause that defence problems too. So if you're willing to take the risk on an injury, I do think there's a good chance that Martial starts. Ten Hag did say that Ronaldo could be back for this game, but if he's got a fit Anthony Martial or a fit Ronaldo to choose from, he is choosing Martial every single time right now, and the fact he only played about 60 minutes on Thursday should be a good thing for Sunday, so he could be a nice punt as well. But as it stands, Mitrovic is out. It's time to get rid if you can. All right, let's take a quick look at my team. Now, apart from the stuff that Pep said about Haaland, I've been pretty lucky in terms of press conference updates. Most of my players seem to be kind of fit and available and have pretty good fixtures. It might be that managers just didn't mention that they're going to be out, but things are looking pretty good as it stands. Let's talk about captaincy really quickly. I'm probably going to captain Salah if we don't get confirmed news that Haaland is starting, because I think there just has to be some doubt in our minds about whether or not he will. And people keep saying stuff like, he's not at the World Cup, so he's got a month off, therefore he can definitely be played. Those things were said the last 2 weeks and it hasn't happened, and I just don't get why Pep would risk making this injury worse. I know that Haaland is in the squad for Norway, and I'm sure if he's fully fit he will play in those games, and there'll be a couple of friendlies that Premier League teams play to keep the players ticking over that aren't on the World Cup. It doesn't mean that Pep is definitely going to start him this week, and what he said in the press conference hasn't really made me any more confident that will happen. Now, if on Saturday we get early team news and Haaland is starting and the servers let me, I will probably move the armband to Haaland, but I would still be worried about what minutes he might get. So if he starts, is he going to get 50 minutes, 60 minutes, 70 minutes? I'm sure the medical staff will let Pep know what Haaland can play, and Haaland will tell Pep how he's feeling and stuff like that. We're not going to get that information. So I might still go for Salah anyway, but I have a feeling that if we get news that Haaland starts, I will probably probably just switch it, save myself a headache, and if Salah goes and gets another 2 goals or a hat-trick, I'll happily accept the differential points. So that's how I'm feeling there. Then it gets a little bit tricky in terms of transfers. If we don't know that Alvarez is starting, like if Haaland starts, there is a chance that Alvarez starts as well. Pep has said numerous times they can play together, but unless I know that for sure, I will do Alvarez to Jesus or Martial. That will almost certainly be my move. And if Haaland doesn't start, then I don't know what I'm going to do. I might just swap a goalkeeper. So I wrote some notes down, basically, for all these situations, knowing that we could get the team news and then the servers might not let me do any of this anyway, which is why the captain's armband is on Salah. Because if the team news comes in that Haaland's benched and the servers go down, I don't want to have to switch my captain from Haaland to Salah. That's why it's on him right now, just in case. And if Haaland starts and I still can't change it, so be it. So if we get no news, I'm going to do Salah captain, and I'm going to move Alvarez to Jesus or Martial, and I'll just play Haaland instead. I think Jesus is the obvious option. You know, fully fit. Arsenal have scored plenty of goals so far this season. Martial just feels like a bit of a nicer punt when it is the final game week before unlimited transfers. I just worry about his injury record. It just ain't good at all. If Haaland starts, I will probably captain Haaland and I will still do the Alvarez move because I will assume without team news that he will be benched. He has started a lot of games recently. I think he's young enough. He can easily play against Brentford at home as well. But I think we have to assume that for most games, it'll probably just be one of them that plays. If we find out Haaland and Alvarez start, then it's down to kind of goalkeeper transfer maybe. Everson to Alisson, double up on the Liverpool defence, hope they get a clean sheet and just go from there. Because if you look at my team, if Alvarez and Haaland start against Brentford, I mean, that team looks pretty good. And then you're coming down to whether or not I make a defender transfer and bench Trippier. But do I really want to bench Trippier? Probably not. So the only thing left will be a goalkeeper transfer. Bench Danny Ward, even though he's been brilliant for me. I mean, that sounds so boring, doesn't it? Making a goalkeeper transfer in game week 16 when I'm going to get to completely reset my team. But I think things are looking pretty good, and I've got 2 million in the bank. It doesn't let me go from Zaha to De Bruyne or something like that. I guess the only thing I could be interested in is maybe getting Foden in, but honestly, I'm happy to give Zaha, Martinelli and Saka all a game this week. So that's what I'd probably be looking at. Haaland and Alvarez start, I may make a goalkeeper transfer. That's how boring I am at times. And then if Haaland's benched, but I decide that I'm still going to start him in case he gets something coming off the bench, obviously, then I might still just do that goalkeeper transfer because I will assume that Alvarez starts. I hope you're following along. And I'll captain Salah. If Haaland's benched and I bench him too, then I got 2 options really. Well, I've got real one option, which would be Gay to Perisic or Gabriel, and then play 4-4-2. I could do Andreas Pereira to Almiron, but I don't think I would do that. I think I would do the defender transfer instead. And then, of course, I would captain Salah in that situation. Just on Perisic versus Gabriel, I really do rate the Arsenal defence, and Gabriel is great from set pieces. I don't think that Perisic is necessarily going to play in the front 3 or the front 2, but I do think he'll play as a left wing-back. So he could be attacking against Leeds, but I wouldn't be surprised if Leeds score. So I don't really want to do that. I think the realistically is, if Haaland's bench, I will probably just start him anyway. I've got Andreas, like if you look at my team, I've got Andreas Pereira on the bench who could come on. Webster could come on as well. So I'll probably just make the goalkeeper change. And if Danny Ward keeps another clean sheet, I will not hold it against him because he's been an absolute hero. So that's my team. Let me know what you think about my plans. Is there anything I've missed? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, so is a move from Trippier to Perisic viable as a 1-week punt? I can't believe I'm going to say this because I definitely wouldn't have said this at the start of the season. I'm not convinced that Perisic against Leeds at home is that much better than Trippier against Chelsea at home. I don't expect Chelsea to concede many goals, but when I look at that attack and the players they have, it feels like an attack that could score 3 to 4 goals against just about anyone, but they just never seem to do that. Plus, the Newcastle defence is pretty good, and Trippier is obviously quite attacking. I guess if I was on a free hit and I had the option of Trippier or Perisic, I probably would pick Perisic. So that tells me that in the back of my mind, I do think Perisic is a better option this week, and therefore this transfer might be viable. But then you've got to question whether or not there's a better move in your team you could make. So I don't necessarily have a great example, right? But let's say it was Trippier to Perisic or Almiron to Saka. I think I'd rather have Trippier and Saka than Perisic and Almiron, right? So it really depends what else you can do with your team. The other thing to consider is how much value you have built up in Trippier. If I just go over to the FPL page, Newcastle have some pretty good fixtures. after the break. So Leicester away, Leeds at home, Arsenal away. I guess playing Leicester and Arsenal away is not necessarily ideal in the first 3 fixtures back because both of those teams could score. But outside of that, like Leeds at home, Fulham at home, Palace away, West Ham at home, Bournemouth away, you're not going to be worried about having to play Trippier in any of those matches. He's almost certainly, if fit, going to be on a lot of people's, I can't really call them wildcard teams. It's not a wildcard, but unlimited transfers team. I think Trippier will be on there. So that's something to consider because a lot of you will have money tied up in Trippier. Even for me, who got on Trippier kind of really late in terms of I bought him, then I sold him, then I got him again. If you just see here, sorry, I bought him at 5.6 and he's gone up to 5.9. So I can sell him for 5.7. So if I did Trippier to Perisic this week, I would then have to pay 0.2 million straight away to get Trippier back. And for some of you, you will have had him since he was 5 million, and it's going to cost even more to get him back. So I just question whether it's worth the team value loss. Yes, Perisic is probably a better option this week, but is there something else you can do where you hold that team value and maybe net yourself even more points by making a different transfer? So it's one of those that I don't hate, but deep down, I don't necessarily think it's a great move. Alright, so this question's about Andreas Pereira. I've seen a lot of managers putting faith in Andreas and provisionally starting him this week to avoid taking a hit. What is your position on starting him? In my case, I'd be looking to bring in Jesus and Konate for Mitrovic and Diaz for a hit and then bench Andreas. So the broad answer is I wouldn't go out of my way to take a hit just so that I could bench Andreas Pereira. I think he's okay to play this week. I think Fulham at home are going to cause a lot of teams problems this season, right? Maybe less so without Mitrovic in the team, I get that. But I still think they're a team that kind of want to play on the front foot. They do want to attack. Against Man City, that wasn't necessarily the case. But it's much more difficult to go away to Man City and play, even without Mitrovic, than it is to play at home against Man United. And I've said this about Man United a lot this season. You can see that they're improving in some ways and in terms of how Ten Hag wants to play and stuff like that. And Casemiro has been a really big help in terms of improving that defence. But there are still some games where it just doesn't quite happen. They don't keep that clean sheet like Villa last week. So I think I'd be okay playing Andreas, especially when you factor in the hit, because the key thing with unlimited transfers next week, you've got to make that hit pay this week. So if Andreas Pereira blanks and gets 2 points, and then you take the hit into account as well, the player that you bring in has to get at least 4 more points than whatever you would have done instead, but just played Andreas, right? So that's one thing to think about. It then obviously depends on the actual transfers. So for your transfers, for example, well, Mitrovic is definitely out, and Diaz, you just don't know if he's definitely going to start, right? That's always a little bit of an issue. They've got plenty of other centre-backs that could play instead. If he does play, then Brentford at home is a pretty good fixture. But I guess if you do have a little bit of doubt on that, you could take that hit because Konate should play and Liverpool got a home game against Southampton. And obviously Jesus could get points against Wolves away. So I don't think your hit is that bad. But I guess the alternative is Andreas Pereira, Diaz at Man City plus 4 points, and I don't think there's any guarantee that Jesus and Konate outscore that. So I think in your case I might be tempted to do that, but for most people, don't go. I've been in this position before where you really don't want to play your bench player, and I don't necessarily agree with people that say Andreas is a 6.5 million midfielder, you know, but priced at 4 points. I don't necessarily agree with that, but he is still a pretty good option to play. And if Mitrovic is out, which apparently he is, right, from the press conferences, you know, if it's the same setup as against Man City, Andreas Pereira will also be on penalties as well. And who's to say they can't win one against Man United? So there will be definite hits that you could take, and that will involve benching Andreas, especially, you know, in this case, I assume Diaz to Konate is to get the funds to do Mitrovic to Jesus, which I think would be okay. But for a lot of you, you're just not going to need to take the hit, and you should probably just play Andreas instead, as boring as it probably feels this week. So I've been asked this question quite a few times this week, right? Not always with 2 free transfers, sometimes it's just with 1. But the way to think about it is going to be the same anyway. So if you had Firmino, and in this case 2 free transfers, and enough money in the bank, would you upgrade him to Nunez this week? Now I do think in isolation for game week 16 against Southampton at home, Nunez is better than Firmino. So in turn, that transfer could definitely be worth it. For my team, for example, the most expensive forward I can afford is Jesus or Firmino. If I had the money, I would would absolutely get Nunez in. Then it just comes down to a similar thinking to the Trippier to Perisic move that we discussed earlier. Is this the best way to use one of your transfers, or is there another way that you could get extra points? Because I don't think Firmino is a bad option this week, but if the rest of the team is looking pretty good, and obviously in this case you got 2 free transfers, then absolutely I think you can make this move. It's one of those that in the past a lot of content creators, including myself, would call a sideways move, because you're just moving one Liverpool attacker to another one, but you are buying the better one, right? And if it so happens that they play Southampton at home, Firmino gets a couple of returns and Nunez gets nothing, you just have to accept that. Those things can happen. But again, I always think about it from like a free hit team perspective. If I was building a free hit team this week and I was including 3 Liverpool players, it would be Trent, Salah and Nunez. I wouldn't even really think about Firmino. So I think the transfer is perfectly okay as long as you haven't got anything else to do. If, for example, you've got like Calvert-Lewin and Firmino, or Mitrovic and Firmino, or, you know, Wilson and Firmino, you should probably deal with that other forward before you worry about Firmino, even if it means going for someone like Martial or Scamacca or whoever it is that you can afford, rather than doing the upgrade instead. So it's a good move in that I think it will net you extra points, but maybe not a huge amount. So then it's going to come down to what else you need to do in your team. But I do really rate Nunez this week. I really wish I could have him in my team. So there we go. They are some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 16 deadline. If you enjoyed that video and found it useful, make sure to give it a like. And if you haven't done so already, it will take you 2 seconds to click subscribe. Also, make sure before the 20th of November to sign up for the Global Cup. Like I said earlier, it's completely free to play. Link in the description. Make sure to join my Min League as well, because there's even more prizes up for grabs if you do that too. So there's no reason to really not get involved, especially when it is completely free to play. In terms of content over the World Cup break, I'll of course have the deadline stream tomorrow as normal. I'll also have the knee-jerk stream on Sunday. I'll be covering World Cup fantasy, but I'll also be doing some FPL content in between as well, because we need to start thinking about unlimited transfers. Obviously, a lot of how we pick our team will depend on what happens over the World Cup in terms of injuries, in terms of how far into the tournament players go, but it's still going to be worthwhile thinking about before we get to that Game Week 17 deadline. So for any of you that don't want to play World Cup Fantasy, which is absolutely fair enough, there'll still be some FPL content over this break, especially as we get closer to the deadline, where I'll ramp it up even more. So that should cover everything. Make sure to check out the Global Cup, link in the description below. Give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you again soon.